Millions of modern workers willingly trade their finite, irreplaceable biological time for a stable corporate salary. Society globally glorifies this exact transaction as the ultimate, unshakable foundation for financial safety and personal peace. This is a mathematically engineered, highly toxic, and entirely fatal biological trap. The modern corporate machine profits exclusively from this state of mass neurological exhaustion and forced compliance. Elite corporate institutions actively suppress the severe clinical data regarding chronic workplace survival and its irreversible impact on human cognition. Relying on a steady paycheck inside a cubicle literally fries the human central nervous system from the inside out. The precise biological mechanism responsible for actively locking the brain into chronic stress is intentionally hidden from the general public. The critical window of opportunity to reverse this severe neurological degradation is closing rapidly today. Ignoring these next clinical minutes guarantees a permanent state of intellectual stagnation and generational financial poverty. Elite financial independence absolutely requires a naturally dominant, highly recovered, and sharply functioning human brain. The modern corporate rat race actively destroys that exact vital biological hardware. Time is rapidly running out to fix this induced metabolic disaster before the neural damage becomes absolutely permanent. The modern working class blindly worships the illusion of absolute corporate safety. They falsely equate a steady, predictable paycheck with elite financial stability and freedom from risk. This is a dangerous, highly manufactured illusion explicitly designed to keep the masses exhausted, docile, and mathematically dependent. The human brain manages daily metabolic energy with extreme, uncompromising precision. It absolutely requires natural, uninterrupted biological rhythms to function perfectly and process complex, abstract variables. Severe daily corporate pressure violently disrupts this essential neurological energy supply, throwing the entire organism into a hidden state of physiological panic. When the physical body is trapped inside an artificial office environment for 9 hours, it desperately demands parasympathetic recovery. The brain naturally attempts to slow down the nervous system to repair damaged neural pathways and consolidate critical memory. Forcing the body to endure endless mundane tasks and artificial deadlines aggressively overrides this essential evolutionary healing mechanism. The biological tax is devastating. Fluid intelligence drops significantly. Short-term memory fragments completely. They look physically secure and socially successful on the outside, but their biological hardware decays rapidly on the inside. This is the dark, unspoken neuroscience of the modern corporate mentality. Exhausted workers constantly hide their overwhelming, chronic daily brain fog simply to maintain their professional status. They physically lose the biological capacity to read complex books, build independent systems, or execute deep, strategic financial work. Their delicate neural pathways are actively burning out from severe, relentless overstimulation. The illusion of perfect stability perfectly masks a terrifying biological reality. Forcing extreme economic compliance while the body is exhausted destroys the nervous system completely. The biological cost for this predictable paycheck is severe, irreversible early-onset neurodegeneration. How a stable job fries your adrenal glands. The modern corporate environment is a literal, mathematical biological disaster for the human animal. Human evolution never designed the fragile nervous system to endure relentless, daily artificial microstressors. Constant email notifications, harsh fluorescent lighting, passive-aggressive management, and toxic, artificial deadlines create massive, compounding biological trauma. Learning new, complex skills outside of work becomes a literal physical biological impossibility under these conditions. Employees regularly forget basic vocabulary, struggle to articulate simple concepts, and suffer from extreme mood swings. They absolutely cannot maintain deep, meaningful conversations because their attention span has been violently shattered. The brain is entirely too busy managing the violent internal chemical storm to care about it. This highly unnatural process triggers an immediate, aggressive systemic inflammatory response deep within the body. The brain detects this severe environmental stress almost instantly, bypassing all logical thought. The hypothalamus misinterprets this self-inflicted corporate pressure as a literal life-threatening predator attack. It violently activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis to manage the perceived biological crisis. The individual falsely believes they are simply securing a stable financial future for their family. Biologically, they are aggressively inducing early-onset neurodegeneration and a state of chronic, unshakable physical fatigue. The human nervous system begins to literally short-circuit and fail entirely under the weight of the corporate hierarchy. Neural electrical processing slows down dramatically due to severe, compounding oxidative damage. The exhausted worker simply cannot process high-level, asymmetric information because their biology is fighting a silent war. Biological cost of corporate survival. Surviving the modern office guarantees severe, irreversible biological consequences that extend far beyond simple burnout. Chronic corporate survival forces the autonomic nervous system into permanent sympathetic overdrive, triggering an endless cascade of stress hormones. The physical body remains permanently trapped in a fight-or-flight biological response, misinterpreting the cubicle as a war zone. It is constantly fighting a violent, invisible internal biological war that consumes massive amounts of cellular energy. This silent, grinding war destroys the natural human dopamine baseline entirely, leaving the individual completely numb. Natural ambition evaporates completely under the crushing weight of profound, unyielding daily exhaustion. Executing basic daily discipline outside of the office requires monumental, exhausting, and highly painful conscious effort. The corporate cubicle effectively becomes a daily site of active, compounding biological decay. The central nervous system completely fries under this relentless pressure, losing its neuroplasticity. Extreme workplace compliance rapidly mutates into severe, irreversible biological punishment that guarantees lifelong mediocrity. The employee falsely believes they are simply performing their required, honorable societal duty. Biologically, they are simply trading their irreplaceable health for heavily devalued fiat currency. The hidden, fatal danger lies directly in the absolute lack of true biological recovery. The microglia, which act as the essential immune cells of the human brain, begin to aggressively mutate. Under normal physiological conditions, they quietly clean metabolic waste and dead cellular matter from delicate neurons. However, chronic workplace stress forcefully alters the microglia's biological behavior, turning them into hostile agents. They become hyperactive, aggressive, and highly destructive immune cells entirely out of control. Instead of cleaning the brain, they start actively attacking and eating perfectly healthy neurons. It's a severe neuroinflammation driven directly by the toxic ideology of the modern corporate culture. The individual blindly believes they are building a reliable, safe retirement fund for the future. In reality, their own overactive immune system is actively destroying their brain mass. Thoughts become incredibly sluggish, highly fragmented, and deeply difficult to properly organize. Reaction times plummet to embarrassing, heavily delayed biological levels comparable to severe sleep deprivation. Severe brain fog becomes a permanent, daily, inescapable biological reality that cripples all higher-level thought. This is the unglamorous, terrifying biological cost of extreme corporate compliance and obedience. Men literally destroy their natural longevity and their brain mass simultaneously for a false sense of security. This lethal secret is heavily guarded by the billion-dollar corporate industry to maintain a docile workforce. The corporate machine aggressively sells security while intentionally hiding the structural brain damage required to earn it. My salary destroys your deep ambition. True generational wealth requires asymmetric leverage, deep strategic ambition, and the biological capacity to execute massive risks. Chronically stressed brain physically cannot process complex financial leverage mathematically or logically. The exhausted employee mind operates purely in a primitive limbic survival mode, completely controlled by the amygdala. It only thinks about paying immediate bills, avoiding managerial conflict, and surviving the current workday. A fried nervous system completely blocks long-term pattern recognition entirely, rendering the individual blind to massive economic shifts. The absolute safest corporate employees often remain in severe financial poverty their entire lives. They simply trade their finite biological time for a fixed, limited number that inflation constantly erodes. A natural, deeply calm brain processes complex data variables at extreme, lightning-fast speeds with zero internal friction. Inversely, the overstimulated, exhausted brain processes basic data through thick biological mud, constantly dropping crucial details. This clearly explains the secret silent depression lurking directly behind the steady, reliable paycheck. These heavily burdened workers possess zero biological energy for genuine joy, boundless creativity, or massive strategic ambition. Chronic workplace survival is a direct, fully paved path to modern intellectual and economic poverty. The prefrontal cortex is the biological command center that dictates complex human logic and massive financial strategy. It is, without question, the absolute most metabolically expensive organ within the human body. This highly evolved neural region demands exactly 20% of all daily human caloric intake just to maintain its baseline function. The prefrontal cortex is the biological command center that dictates complex human logic and massive financial strategy. It is, without question, the absolute most metabolically expensive organ within the human body. This highly evolved neural region demands exactly 20% of all daily human caloric intake just to maintain its baseline function. The rat race cuts this vital fuel supply and recovery process completely, plunging the brain into starvation. The biological response is immediate, violent, and highly devastating to the individual's future potential. Without adequate rest, the exhausted brain literally begins to cannibalize its own ambition to survive the office environment. Executive function physically shuts down to save finite metabolic energy for basic respiratory and cardiac survival. Complex financial problem-solving becomes a literal, physical, biological impossibility under these harsh conditions. The brain intentionally starves its highest cognitive centers to preserve the primitive internal organs. A steady paycheck demands this exact state of systemic biological starvation and cognitive suppression. The rat race destroys the exact biological capacity required to generate massive, independent wealth. A starved, physically shrunken prefrontal cortex cannot hold attention on complex financial systems for more than a few minutes. The corporate hierarchy actively engineers a weak, docile, easily satisfied mind incapable of challenging the status quo. The ultimate biological cost of extreme corporate safety is the complete and total death of human ambition. The hidden link between paychecks and brain fog. Chronic corporate brain fog is a severe, highly misunderstood biological epidemic sweeping through the modern workforce. Millions of office workers walk around completely unable to focus properly, their minds thick, sluggish, and paralyzed. They falsely attribute this profound exhaustion to simply working hard and being a responsible adult. The actual biological truth is far darker, highly disturbing, and mathematically devastating to their future. Their prefrontal cortex is actively shutting down to survive the chaotic, highly unnatural inputs of the corporate environment. Elite cognitive function relies entirely on a foundation of absolute, unshakable biological safety. The brain must feel completely secure to enter the flow state and perform deep, uninterrupted work. Daily low-level corporate stress mathematically signals a severe, life-threatening famine environment to the primal brain. The brain misinterprets the constant social pressure and artificial lighting as severe physical danger. It violently locks the autonomic nervous system in sympathetic fight-or-flight mode permanently. The human operating system downgrades to its absolute most primitive biological level, focusing only on immediate survival. Salaried employee simply cannot outwork a fully independent, biologically optimized competitor mentally. Toxic metabolic byproducts from chronic stress accumulate rapidly inside the human skull every single waking hour. The lymphatic system, responsible for flushing these toxins out of the brain, completely shuts down during periods of high stress. It only operates properly during deep, restorative, high-quality human delta sleep, which corporate anxiety destroys. The constant dread of the morning commute violently destroys deep sleep architecture and essential delta wave production. The brain never fully cleans itself of the toxic metabolic waste, creating an environment of severe neurotoxicity. This guarantees chronic, compounding, and highly destructive daily brain fog that cripples all high-level executive function. Furthermore, constantly checking corporate emails and ticking off small boxes creates cheap, artificial dopamine spikes. The fragile human brain rapidly becomes heavily addicted to this violent, unnatural chemical reward system. The individual starts blindly chasing fake productivity rather than actually building sustainable, asymmetric financial leverage. Over time, the central nervous system detects this toxic overstimulation and executes biological downregulation. It actively destroys its own dopamine receptors to reduce the chaotic noise and protect the underlying neural tissue. A highly compliant worker literally loses the biological capacity to focus deeply on a single profound task. They suffer from severe, clinically induced limbic anhedonia, the total inability to feel pleasure every single day. They achieve their basic corporate goals flawlessly but become biological slaves to the system that is destroying them. How to reclaim your nervous system and escape. Reclaiming absolute cognitive dominance requires completely and violently abandoning the modern toxic corporate illusion forever. The true global elite optimize their entire existence solely for maximum neural horsepower, never for an illusion of safety. They absolutely refuse to trade their biological vitality and cognitive longevity for a basic, highly taxed monthly salary. The human brain absolutely requires deep, unshakable biological calm to function brilliantly and flawlessly at the highest levels. Returning to a natural, highly stable biological baseline is absolutely mandatory immediately to halt the cognitive decay. This targeted rest protocol stops the violent neural inflammation and halts the destructive microglial attacks instantly. Chronic corporate stimulation and unnecessary digital microtasks must be eliminated entirely to reduce toxic daily cortisol spikes. The vagus nerve must be activated daily through stillness to enter deep, restorative parasympathetic recovery. This rapidly and efficiently flushes toxic metabolic waste completely from the frontal neural pathways, restoring cognitive clarity. Elite executive function returns rapidly once the artificial exhaustion and chronic cellular starvation finally end. The frontal cortex physically expands back to its optimal, powerful, and highly dominant biological size. Deep strategic focus becomes entirely frictionless, automatic, highly sustainable, and incredibly sharp against the competition. Memory retention sharpens immediately to elite, highly competitive global financial standards, allowing for massive data processing. The modern human being must deliberately choose today between endless corporate slavery or absolute cognitive supremacy. The highest global earners always prioritize the protection of their central nervous system infinitely above a steady paycheck. True modern power is strictly mental, highly strategic, deeply leveraged, and never relies on blind obedience. Rebuilding the shattered dopamine baseline requires totally abandoning the safe rat race cult and its toxic dogmas. It requires treating the human brain like an elite, highly protected biological sanctuary that demands the highest quality inputs. This clinical breakdown firmly sets the required theoretical foundation for elite biological recovery and massive wealth generation. However, theoretical knowledge without exact, aggressive tactical execution guarantees absolute, mathematically certain failure. The exact, step-by-step clinical resources required to biologically rebuild these specific neural pathways exist right now. They are located directly in the description below this video right now. Go to the description immediately and access these elite optimization protocols today before the algorithm removes them. Applying these specific clinical resources guarantees the reclamation of lost cognitive dominance entirely and permanently. This eliminates adrenal fatigue fundamentally and completely bypasses the exhausted, distracted global competition. Subscribe to this channel immediately to join the absolute minority operating at peak biological and financial performance. Stop trading human cognitive longevity for a fake, highly toxic daily corporate mentality that guarantees long-term poverty. The critical window of opportunity to reverse this specific neural damage is closing extremely fast. Reclaim the shattered nervous system today before the biological damage becomes permanent and irreversible.